Good evening, everyone. This is Melissa Tanner from TNT Paranormal, and welcome to Paranormal U. Tonight we're going to talk about orbs and light anomalies and pareidolia and bugs, things to look out for when you're taking your photos or watching your video. Starting off with just a disclaimer, I don't claim to know everything about this field, not by far. I don't claim to be able to debunk every single thing, but I do pride myself in trying to educate people on things and trying to teach people about the paranormal. If, though, you run into something where you're suffering a medical condition or you're having some problems, don't wait for a paranormal professional. Please seek medical attention as soon as possible. We've had people come to us with various things that are definitely medically related, and they needed to seek professional help versus coming to a paranormal team. And also, there's a lot of teams like us out in the world, so check them out. You know, if you're having some problems, don't rely just on training like this. Go seek a team out, get their advice, ask for more than one opinion if that is something that's important to you. So tonight, orbs, light anomalies, pareidolia, bugs. So we're going to talk about what they are and some of the ins and outs, as well as I've got some examples of stuff to show you and hopefully give you guys some ideas of things to look for, especially in photos. Photography is the hardest thing to actually pick up paranormal and not have a lot of false positives and or just normal occurrences that seem paranormal. So let's first start with orbs. I know orbs are everywhere. We see them every day. It's definitely an overly used word, in my opinion, in this field. So what do you think an orb is? Is an orb an entity, such as a ghost or a spirit? Is it an airborne particle, such as dust, moisture, pollen, mold, or is it a bug? So believe it or not, it's really all of the above, but B and C are the most common. Airborne particles are 99.99% of what people are picking up in their photos. Bugs are also in there, but not nearly as often as dust and pollen are showing up. So make sure you scrutinize your photos. And I'm going to explain to you why orbs are showing up so much in photography today. Things have happened with cameras. Cameras have changed. The sensor chip in digital cameras have changed where they're now smaller than they used to be for the old 35 millimeter. This gives you a wider angle lens. Therefore, you're picking up more field of view. You're actually getting more of a screen than we used to with the old 35 millimeters. Your depth of field in front of the camera has changed. So that's caused objects that used to be out of focus are now more in focus. So if you've ever taken photos with your cell phones, things that are closer to the lens now are picking up more of the focus, and therefore, like a dust particle, if it goes in front of your lens, it becomes in focus, and then it shows up on your pictures. If these objects become too close, whether it's a hair follicle that happens to be in front of pollen, dust, it breaks up this circle of confusion, and it actually then shows up more clearly than you would expect it to, especially for how clearly our human eye. Our eyes overlook dust particles all the time. It's not something we typically see unless we're shining a light into an area. This also meant that things that at the closest distance then become more in focus. So then you may not realize your hair is in front of the lens, but it is, and it's picking up, and it looks like a lot of people put them as vortexes. So these two zones, now that they've become closer together, and now they're closer to the flash, more and more things are showing up. More things are getting picked up by these lenses than used to on 35 millimeter, or even when we were using Polaroid cameras with the pictures that would pop out the bottom. This new zone is now being called by a lot of people as the orb zone, especially when you're using digital cameras. And this orb zone is actually a triangle shape right in front of the lens going outward, where anything that falls into that view gets picked up more clearly and then shows up on your photos. So whether it's dust, even water droplets, you know, you don't realize that it's misting outside and you pick it up, or maybe you're near a fountain or near the ocean and you're picking up water droplets. Small insects, they may be too small for you to see them, but the camera will pick it up. So this makes it confusing for teams like us because we have to look at things very closely and scrutinize it. But part of the reason that also has caused a lot of problems, and this is why we do not review cell phone. If someone submits a cell phone picture, we won't review it. Future, we'll talk about ghost apps, but for this exercise, it's also because the flash is now in a close proximity of the camera lens. If you think back about old 35 millimeters, if you've ever hired a photographer for, say, professional photos, those flashes were about 3 feet, if not further, away from the camera. Well, now they're sheer millimeters from the lens. So what's happening now is you've got the flash really close to the lens. It lights up that orb zone, therefore picking up any of those airborne particles, illuminating them, and making them look like something paranormal. I know another thing that's happening a lot is because an orb has a color, people are saying that maybe that means it's the entity's mood. So if it's red, maybe it's happy. If it's blue, maybe it's sad. I'm not really sure about those things. I haven't studied that enough. I haven't researched it enough, but I have researched if certain colors appear in airborne type particles, what could it mean? And there actually are several groups out there. I just named one here. But if an orb itself is yellow, blue, or red, it typically is a pollen spore. These are things our eyes can't pick up, but again, the camera is because of its sensitive nature. Green orbs could be mold, and I'm not talking about black mold. I'm talking about just normal mold that comes off of different plants. If it's gray or white, it could be dust. Snow and water will also show up as white. So here's an example. This is a picture that I took in 2010. It was October, so that means it's hay season and crop season. And we were out in a field in the middle of Illinois, and we took this photo. Look at all the dust orbs, all the pollen orbs, all the different airborne particles. Granted, some of them could be, I can't say that none of them are something paranormal, but I gotta believe there weren't 3 or 4 dozen paranormal things going on at the same time. Because of the time of the year, I also can't exclude all of those factors. So I've got to take that into account. If we had this many spirits around us at all times, we'd be bumping into them constantly. So make sure you use your skeptic hat. You know, look at things a little more closely. Look at the environment around you. Another example, we did an investigation and we were in an attic. You notice there was some construction stuff around. You notice it's dirty. And we picked up a few orbs. I circled a few because I didn't know if they'd show up very well on the camera. But again, it's dust. Think about the environment. Old house, remodeling's going on, there's drywall. More than likely, you're just picking up those particles. This next example is from Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I'm sure several of you have been there. It is one of my favorite places to go. And this was actually one of the rooms that used to be the OR room. And you'll notice there are several orbs around. Again, because of how dusty Waverly Hills is, it's just the environment. So just look at your environment and try to keep your skeptic hat on when you're reviewing your photos. Now, that doesn't mean you never will pick up anything paranormal. Occasionally it does happen. Those should be rare. That's what the term paranormal means, out of the ordinary, not the norm. If you do get that, there are a few factors we look at, and if it meets those criteria, we actually call them light anomalies. Orb gets overused, so light anomaly will make it stand out for us a little bit more. But if it is a true paranormal orb, you should have seen it with your naked eye. The only reason why you wouldn't is if you weren't looking in the direction you were taking the photo, or maybe you were blinded by the actual camera itself as you were looking into the viewfinder. They should be balls of light, so in that case, if it truly is a light anomaly, it should be giving off energy, so then you should see it more glowing. It actually should give off more of a glow versus a flatness to dust. And I've actually got an example of both here in a minute. They should also appear more three-dimensional versus flat. It's unknown what type of energy they truly are at this point. I mean, you know, we have energy when we live, so what does it stick around afterwards? That's a whole nother topic for another day. But in the public, they're still going to call it orbs. But again, we try to call them light anomalies to make a distinction. So we were at Waverly Hills in May of 2010, and we actually picked up this ball of light. It actually came, this was the kitchen. And this actually was picked up on an IR camera, but I did a still of it so you could kind of see where a light anomaly, how solid it is. But you notice it's not perfectly round. It actually is more oblong shaped. It's slightly fuzzy around the edges where the center is more solid. What I did was took a still of the IR camera frame. I then put it into a application that claims it's a thermal application. I can't say yay or nay because you actually would need, hey Carl, you would actually need, you know, true thermal imaging equipment to get that. But either way, it actually looks at the depth and thickness of things. So as you see from this, it actually is solid. This square thing on the ground here was a sign. So that was a sign that was on the ground. Look how solid it is. And look at how solid the light anomaly is. Now to show you a distinction, here's an example of where you've got an orb that's, see how it's blue and green, more cool tones, more circular in nature, where this, again, not completely circular and different colors applied. This is the exact same room, the exact same camera, just 2 different times of the night. It was about 44 minutes apart. So I kind of wanted to show you the difference of what a dust orb would look like versus something we believe to be more paranormal in nature. Another thing that happens a lot in this field is pareidolia. Pareidolia actually is the true scientist term for this. A lot of people actually misinterpret it and call it matrixing. The term matrixing actually started when ghost hunters used it on the show, and matrixing actually deals with audio. But pareidolia is the true word. It actually is how the brain interprets things we see or hear. So it's how our brain interprets familiar images. So Mickey Mouse, we know what he looks like. Donald Duck. A mouse, a rabbit, things like that, things that we can interpret and turn them into a solid object. Phrases. If you've ever listened to some songs, there's songs where we get the words wrong all the time because that's how we heard it, but that's not what the actual lyrics are. Well, that's actually pareidolia. So again, our brain interpreting it. Where we have to be careful with pareidolia is when we are taking pictures of old windows, especially old lead windows, dirty windows, mirrors, shiny surfaces, we will pick up reflections of ourselves, we'll pick up reflections of other things, or even just the dirt. But our brain will interpret it into it's paranormal. It is something out of this world. You also have to watch smoke, clouds, trees. A lot of things will happen in fire, and I'm actually doing my own study right now where I'm taking pictures of fire and smoke to see how many times I can actually get something paranormal in those pictures. You also have to be careful of lens flare. Lens flare happens a lot. Research your camera and see what the common lens flare looks like for your camera. Do your own experiments. Shine a flashlight into it, see what happens. Point it at the sun, see what happens. It happens in pareidolia, also happens with your hearing. Believe it or not, the term babbling brook actually came from the fact that water flowing would sound like voices. So make sure that you're paying attention to the sounds. A couple years ago, we did some experiments where we took every piece of equipment we owned, video, camera-wise, as well as still, and all the digital recorders. And we did a series of tests. We collected hair from different animals, humans, lint from the dryer, towels, all kinds of stuff. And we sat down for hours and experimented at 0 feet, 3 feet, 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet, and we dropped these things in front of the camera so that we could see what they look like up close, and as far away. For audio, we actually took and recorded sounds, people's stomach growling, other bodily sounds. You guys can only imagine, I'm sure. Dragging chairs across the floor, shutting doors, car doors outside. We recorded all those things on the various recorders so that we could actually see what they sounded like later. And as new members, they all go through reviewing that information, so their brain becomes more familiar with it. So just kind of keep that in mind. Probably the most common thing with pareidolia, if you ever remember as a kid, you would lay on the ground and look at clouds and turn them into objects. That still happens this day. I see pictures probably once a month where someone took pictures of the clouds and they're turning it into something. So here's a really, really, really good example of pareidolia. We received this photo from a friend of the team, and it was a bonfire in their backyard. They were just having a party. As far as we know, nothing happened in a negative way or anything like that. As far as we know, no one passed away. And they saw faces in this photo. So if you look at this, I'll point out a few. There's, sorry, it's taken. There's one right there. One right there. One right there. And then some people even see a cross in the center. So if you really study things hard enough, yes, you can make things paranormal. The biggest thing I will tell you is, why would a spirit come visit their loved one or a stranger and hang out in the fire? Why wouldn't they sit next to you in the chair or stand next to you and talk to you? So try to apply some logic as well. Another thing that happens a lot are people get bugs on their photos and think there's something paranormal. And I actually found this website out there, and it's really good. The Midnight Walkers have shared this, and they captured several different bugs and put this together so you could kind of see what different bugs look like. But again, you need to look for like legs, look for wings. Try to take a series of photos if you can and compare them to the last ones. I actually like this next photo, which I borrowed off the internet. And it shows what it looks like when a moth is continually flying towards a light and they had their camera on a slower shutter speed. But look at how it looks like ribbons. I've actually seen people submit stuff like that as paranormal, but their shutter speed was slow enough they were picking up a moth in flight. So just kind of be aware of that. This next photo is, I actually really, really like it. One of my teammates took it. He was driving through the countryside and he saw this mist looking thing that got his attention enough where he stopped and turned around and went back. Keep in mind this line right here is probably just a reflection from his window. But he took the photo and sent it to me and then asked me if I could figure out what it was. And for the life of me, at the time I could not, but now I know what it is. It's actually a swarm of gnats. So there were so many of them, they were flying, it looked like a mist in broad daylight. So try to think about that. If you are picking up photos where you've got something like this, walk towards it and see if you see bugs flying around. This is another photo I got from somebody where they took a picture out back and it's actually a spider. I'm sure some people might think it's something else, but just think about that. That looks much creepier than it is because it was close enough to the limbs. The the lens flare, or sorry, the flash reflected back onto it, and it makes it look like that, and it was just a small spider. So I've got a few more examples, and they're going to fall into the various categories. So this first one, I went to Epcot, and I was just taking some pictures. And if you've ever been to Epcot, around the center lake where they do illuminations at night, the first thing they do is turn on the flames before they start the fireworks. So I just started snapping photos. These are gas flames, by the way, not natural. And look at how all of them have something in them that you could turn into a face or a shape. So for instance, I see a couple of faces here. I see an older man's side profile here. He's got like a bigger nose, maybe his ears right here. Here's his mouth. Here's a couple of faces side by side. Okay, so Epcot, part of Disney, happy place. Why would spirits go hang out in a man-made fire versus maybe taking the ride of, you know, It's a Wonderful World? So just keep that in mind. It's just normal pareidolia. We took this picture during an investigation, and this was one of the rooms where there were reports. She was using a regular camera with a black light. We sometimes do experiments where we use like a black light. We have like a flashlight kind, and then we also have a rod kind. This light pinkish stuff is the IR camera, so that's nothing. But then she got this mist looking thing in the center. So what it is, I'm not exactly sure. I do know we had other activity that occurred in this room that night, but I find it interesting that this misty looking thing showed up when she shined a black flashlight on it. So possible paranormal event, not 100% sure. Another time when we went to Waverly Hills, one of the people on the tour with us, there were only 10 of us there that night, took this photo. This is the 4th floor before they had windows installed up there, and this would have been the old OR room. And you actually see what looks like a person sitting in the window. People have asked me, okay, what's the ladder for? Well, as you guys probably know, Waverly's always doing construction. So this was right before they put the windows in. So that was up there from the old construction crew. But no one was here at this time. This was probably about 8:30 at night. It was just us, and we were in lockdown mode. So what it is, I'm not exactly sure, but we believe it's something paranormal in nature because we know none of us was there, and the tour guide, the only other person there, was with the team that was outside that took the photo. Another strange photo that was taken by a teammate, she went on a tour of the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and this is the old U-boat 505, so this is the only U-boat we ever had in capture, and it's still at the museum. And so she was taking the tour, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but this actually is about 20 or 30 feet off the ground on the ramp, walking from the upstairs downstairs so you get to the bottom of where the actual sub entry point is. And this black shape showed up on the photo, and you notice it's not on the one she took right afterwards. There's no one standing in front of her. We actually have this type of camera, and I've tried putting my finger in front of it, and it actually shows up flesh tone. It doesn't show up black. So what it is, I can't say for sure, but there are rumors that the U-boat was haunted. So maybe she was lucky enough to pick up the captain who supposedly haunts it. This next photo was taken during an investigation. It's daytime, and she had been taking photos, and she caught this apparition-looking thing. Well, at first glance, it looks kind of scary. But when you break it down, you can tell it's an actual person, and it's actually me. I was walking through. She still had the camera on a slow shutter speed because she was taking photos in a different room, hadn't adjusted it. And because I was walking, it actually made me look blurry. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind where your people are at all times. You might forget they walked in front of you, and so then later when you go back and look, it looks paranormal. So this one was slow shutter. All right, that's the end of the orbs. Next week we're going to be talking about documenting baseline readings and how important that is. Does anybody have any questions? So, David, you saw a blue orb at Waverly? That's cool. Was it in the kitchen? All right, guys. Well, I'm going to call it a night. Feel free to send me any questions or comments. I appreciate you joining in. Again, if you want to find out more information about us or our articles, thanks, Carl. I appreciate it. Go out to tntparanormal.com, Paranormal U. So John is asking me, would you say it would be better to use film or capturing spirits rather than digital? You know, old school is going to tell you film. Film is harder and harder to get, and it's more expensive to process, and digital's much easier. But I definitely think digital is the way of the future. Even photographers now are using more digital. So as far as which one's better, I don't know. I just know which one's cheaper per se. Thank you, David. All right, guys. Hope to see you all next week. Talk to you soon.